Oh, hey, America. How are you? Welcome to what's left of the weekend. Pardon the light here. I normally don't record these at this time of day, and I'm making all sorts of adjustments so as not to appear too ghastly. See what just happened? Look at that. When the paper's down, the light is kind of harsh and blue. But when the paper's up, suddenly the color temperature changes to something golden and a bit softer. I wonder why. I guess the light's hitting the white, doing something inside the iris of the camera, and then it's automatically making some correction. Soft and gold, hard and blue. I think I like soft and gold a little better. I'll have to hold the paper up when I read. You learn something every day. Actually, that's not true. You don't necessarily learn something every day unless you are possessed of a curious mind. And if you have a curious mind but a short attention span, these stories are for you. If you have not subscribed to The Way I Heard It, well, I'll just cut right to the chase. Would you? Would you please go to mikerowe.com/podcast and subscribe? I'd be grateful. I'm writing new ones now and reading old ones in the process, and this is one of the old ones. If you haven't heard one before, give me 5 minutes, give this thing a listen, and I bet when we're done, you're going to go, what have I been missing? And you'll go subscribe, and we'll all be happier for it. I came home today, turned on the TV. I wasn't going to do one of these, like I said. I was going to watch a little TV and catch up on some other stuff, and put it on the news. It's bad news. Turn the channel, is more bad news. Turn the channel again, another kind of bad news. Bad news everywhere. So I came over to my Facebook page, and I'll show you what I saw. There's some good news. Over here on eBay, our apron negligee with the faux pearls is chugging right along at $3,750. $3,750. Put that up for auction yesterday and told an amusing story about it in the hopes to raise a little money for the Mike Rowe Works Foundation and replenish the always dwindling coffers of our work ethic scholarship program. So thanks for those of you who are bidding on it. I know it's weird, but I'm confident the rightful person is going to wind up with this very, very, very strange garment that was somehow spawned through an unholy coupling of the boudoir and the kitchen. There's a sentence I bet you thought you'd never hear before. This story has some sentences in it I bet you haven't heard. Thank you to Janine who sent me this shirt with Charlie Brown on it. It's very, very hard to let the bad news get you down when you're wearing Charlie Brown on your chest. I was thinking of my favorite Charlie Brown cartoon. Do you have one? Mine is, it's kind of a toss-up between a couple, but I think my favorite is with Charlie Brown and Linus are lying in the grass looking up at the sky. And Charlie Brown says to Linus, you ever look up at the clouds and see objects and figures? And Linus says, well, yeah, all the time. And Charlie Brown said, me too. And Linus said, well, what do you see? And Charlie Brown said, you tell me what you see. And Linus said, well, over there in the east, I see what appears to be the stoning of St. Stephen. Remarkable the way the cumulus clouds come together up there. And over there in the west, it looks like Caesar and his legions preparing to cross the Rubicon back in 49 B.C. And over there, if I'm not mistaken, that looks like King Leonidas and Xerxes of Persia at the famous standoff at Thermopylae. The sky is full of history, Charlie Brown. What do you see? And Charlie Brown said, I was going to say I saw a horsey and a doggy, but I changed my mind. I do not laugh at Charlie Brown. I do not laugh with him. Here he is, swinging and missing. But you got to give him credit for swinging. The story's called Rose Garden Rubbish. It goes like this. When you look like a movie star and coworkers call you a golden boy, it might be tempting to head west and try your luck in Hollywood. But when your dad is a successful writer and your grandfather is even more successful, you might feel a certain obligation to find out if you too inherited the literary gene, which is precisely why Peter was sitting in the White House, staring at a blank piece of paper, trying to decide what the President of the United States of America should say next. Peter was not suffering from writer's block. As the newest speechwriter for Lyndon Johnson He knew exactly what the president should say, and he'd already turned out a dozen excellent drafts. Problem was, the president hated everything he wrote. Peter's boss, an old friend named Robert Kintner, was getting worried. "Hey, Golden Boy, you better write something brilliant, fast." But Kintner knew that Peter wasn't really the problem. The problem was Kennedy. JFK's speeches had been so damn good that everything Johnson uttered sounded second-rate by comparison. Peter could hear the ice cracking beneath him when Robert Kintner walked into his office one day and told him his latest policy speech was simply not Kennedy-esque enough. "LBJ isn't happy," said Kintner. "Write up something for the tree-lighting ceremony in the Rose Garden instead." Peter loathed these assignments. He called them Rose Garden rubbish because nobody paid any attention to them. But a job is a job, so Peter got busy writing presidential prose that nobody would ever remember. After the tree lighting comments, he assembled some thoughtful remarks around Miss Teenage America's annual visit, then a gathering of the American Dental Association, followed by some parting words for a special emissary delivering 2 muskoxen to the People's Republic of China. On the positive side, writing Rose Garden rubbish came with no pressure and left Peter time to pursue his other interests, like sipping scotch, learning to play the guitar, and outlining an idea for a new novel, all of which he pursued in his office at the White House. One day, Kintner interrupted Peter's Rose Garden rubbish with a last-minute assignment. That night, a very important state dinner was to be held, and dignitaries from all over the world would be in attendance. The president wanted phonetic spellings of all his guests so as not to butcher their names during his introductory remarks. Peter complied, but neglected to phoneticize the countries as well as the people. Consequently, when Johnson got to the ruler of Nepal, he announced Mahendra perfectly, but raised a few eyebrows when he confidently identified him as the King of Nipple. That was the last straw. Peter's career as a speechwriter was finished, but interestingly, not his tenure at the White House. When Kintner told Peter that LBJ wanted out, Peter refused to leave. "If Johnson wants to fire me, he can tell me himself. I'll be down here in my office," he said. Well, apparently President Johnson was distracted by the war on poverty, the war in Vietnam, and the whole civil rights thing. So while Peter received no more official assignments and no more paychecks, he held on to his security clearance and lingered in his office for many months, sipping his scotch, studying his guitar, and tinkering with an idea for a novel. Eventually, the Secret Service got wise and escorted him off the premises. But by then, Peter had a plan for the future. And when those movie star good looks finally paid off, the Golden Boy didn't have to go to Hollywood. Hollywood came to him and handed him a small part in one of the biggest movies of all time. The role had just a few lines, but Peter made the most of them in his unforgettable portrayal of a local news reporter. Amity Island has long been known for its clean air, clean water, and beautiful white sand beaches. But in recent days, a cloud has appeared on the horizon of this beautiful resort community, a cloud in the shape of a killer shark. Peter had no problem memorizing those lines, partly because he wrote them, quite possibly when he was squatting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, long after the President of the United States had fired him for being a lousy writer. You don't remember his Rose Garden rubbish, but you'll never forget Jaws. And if you're a true fan, you might even recall the name of the shark's youngest victim, Robert Kintner, a young boy named after the man who allowed an aspiring author to linger in his office long enough to sketch out a story that would scare America out of the water. That is how a great white shark emerged from a great white house. It took a president with great expectations, a boss who was willing to look the other way, and a below-average speechwriter named Peter Benchley. Anyway, that's the way I heard it. Anyhow, that's what this podcast is, really. I mean, it's very simple for those of you unacquainted with it. When you subscribe at mikerowe.com/podcast, once a week you get a little story, a little mystery, a little history lesson, all wrapped up in a hot mess of questionable language. So subscribe if you haven't. Bid on my crazy negligee if you're so inclined to be seen in public or in private in such a thing. And enjoy the rest of the weekend. And I will be back. Oh, by the way, my mother sends her regards. Speaking of writers, she's getting close to the end of her first book, and she's promised me. I looked at the initial draft, and frankly, I think it's great. She's punching it up, and then we'll see what happens. You guys totally changed your life, by the way. 980,000 shares or something? Killing me. I'm going to hit stop now because it's important to know when to shut.